Welcome to Exosphere. I'm Skinner Lane, and today I'm here to talk to you about how to avoid the life of suck. So, the thing is that most people go through life living on this bell curve. So we can call this the bell curve of real life. And in this bell curve, most people don't live out here. This is the life of greatness. And most people don't live over here, which is sort of the life of suck. You wake up in the morning, still hungover in the middle of a ditch somewhere, not really sure where your clothes are, maybe something like that. No, unfortunately, most people live right here in the middle, in this land of mediocrity. Yes, that probably means you. We just live right here in the middle where nothing is really that great and nothing is really that shitty either. And most people, though, if you ask them, they don't want to live a life of mediocrity. They would like to live a life of greatness. Now, the trouble with living a life of greatness is that, by definition, it's something that is not possible for everybody, because every time you move the average, there are always going to be people who remain in the average. So if everybody starts becoming great, then the average will reset at a higher level. So by definition, to achieve this life of greatness, whatever you define, and this is the thing, your life of greatness has to be defined by you. I can't tell you what a great life is for you. I can only tell you what a great life is for me. But what I can tell you that is the same for both of us is that the life of greatness is always going to take a lot of extra work to achieve. Because anytime maybe you have a day of greatness or an hour of greatness, and then what happens? Well, then you get regression to the mean, right? Every time you go just a bit above your average, you're immediately being pulled back toward the average. That's just one of the laws of nature. And in fact, if you apply the idea of entropy to human life, you find that you're really being pulled back to just below average at best. So if you're always being pulled back toward average or back to below average, you have to take a really proactive approach to life in order to be above average. And so one of the ways that you can do that is by enhancing your discipline in life. And so we're going to define discipline the way that Scott Peck does in his book, The Road Less Traveled. We're going to define discipline as the set of tools by which we meet and solve the problems and pains of life. Now, your life is full of problems. Some of those problems you acknowledge and some of them you don't. Now, you may be hoping that one day you get to a life with no problems. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that this day is never going to arrive. Well, it will arrive. It will arrive one day, the day called death. And then all of your problems will cease. Now, in the meantime, coming to a way of approaching life where you accept that problems are going to come about every day and you're not surprised by them, where you're not disappointed by them, where you're not disheartened by them, is a much better way to live life than to, every time you encounter a problem, say, oh, why did this problem have to happen to me? As if you somehow are entitled to not have problems happen to you. Now, one of the really important mental models that you can adopt that helps you embrace problems as they come is a concept called the infinite game mentality. Now, this idea comes to us from a guy named James Carse, who wrote a book called Finite and Infinite Games. And in this book, Carse defines the infinite game as a game that is played for the sole purpose of extending play. And this is contrasted with normal games that we're used to, which are finite games. Finite games are played for the purpose of bringing play to an end, calculating the final score, declaring winners and losers, and giving the winners their prizes. And this is how we actually organize most of our life, is around finite games, where there's a winner and a loser. Unlike the infinite game, which is organized around the principle of merely trying to extend play. So in finite games, you have lots of competitors, because there's something to win, and not everybody can win it. In the infinite game, you only have collaborators. You have other people who you are playing with for the purpose of trying to keep playing. Now, I don't know if you enjoy activities like, say, surfing or hiking, but these are really good examples of leisure activities that operate around a sort of infinite game mentality. I myself am a really avid hiker. I like to go out in nature. And when I'm out in nature, all I want to do is stay out in nature. I don't want to go home. People I know, I'm not a surfer, but people I know who like surfing describe their experience surfing in much the same way that I think of my experience hiking. They just want to stay out there on the waves all day. They don't want it to end. Now, think about if you tried to organize your work life around that sort of principle. Imagine if you found yourself doing work that you liked so much that you just wanted to keep doing it, where it didn't even really feel that much like work. Now, this isn't to say that your work wouldn't have problems, because when I'm out in nature hiking, I run into problems all the time. I'm running out of water. This is a problem that needs to be solved. If you're surfing, you encounter problems with your equipment, with the water, with whatever. So this infinite game mentality isn't this idyllic paradise where you're going to be without problems. But it's where you're enjoying what you're doing so much that the problems are just sort of incidental to keeping playing. Now, this is very different from the way that we organize most of our educational and professional lives. Right? If you poll the average university student about what is your goal for attending university, most of them will say, oh, it's to graduate. And what happens at graduation? Well, at graduation, there is a declaration of winners and losers. There's a score assigned to you. And this score then determines how you enter the next finite game of life, which is the job market. So you get a number that says you are this good at this last finite game, so that you can exchange that number for a starting position in a new finite game. And if you ask most of the people in their jobs what their goal of that job is, it's obviously they want to generate a bit of money to pay their bills, but their real goal is to retire so that they can stop having to work to pay the bills. And the bills just pay themselves out of money that's saved up over the years. And many people also will say, oh, I'm also working in order to go on vacation. And vacation is just a miniature retirement. In fact, vacation is a really misleading form of miniature retirement, because when you are on vacation, you're saying, one day when I'm retired, life will be like this every day. But of course, you're discounting the time value of this future permanent vacation, because you aren't taking into account that you will be old, that your body will have deteriorated significantly, and so you won't be enjoying those days quite as much as you think you will. Now, for those of you listening that are, say, maybe over the age of 40 or 45, you'll already know this experience, probably. And it's not so pleasant. Now, imagine that this just keeps getting worse. So, this should give you some priority in organizing your life around an infinite game mentality, where what you are doing in the present is something that you just want to keep doing, rather than something that you want to stop doing. And that approach gives you the motivation to have the concern and love for yourself to want to endure the spiritual growth required to live a disciplined life. So you see, these things are all connected. So if we go back to this life of greatness, one of the central mental models that you can adopt to pursue it is an infinite game mentality. With this infinite game mentality, you have a motivation to wake up every day and work at the margin to enhance your discipline. So let's go back and talk about this life of mediocrity and how you can move your average up. And one of the ways that you can move your average upward is through the development of habit. And I like to call habits a sort of form of automated discipline. When you develop a habit, it is like having discipline, but without the energy expended each time. So you do have to invest a lot of energy on the front end to develop these habits, more than it takes just to do it, let's say, manually. But once you've automated your discipline in any particular area of your life, then you no longer have to expend that energy each time. Now, the only thing that is, I would say, as finite or more finite in our life than time is energy. In fact, in relative terms, we tend to have more time than energy. There's actually a lot you can do in 16 waking hours of the day if you have the energy and motivation to do it. In fact, very few people are really being productive 16 hours per day every day. Very, very unusual. And this is because we just don't have the energy. Because doing productive things takes lots of energy. So the more of these productive, useful things we can do via habit, the more energy we have to do other things. So this is why developing habit increasingly makes your life less sucky and moves you closer and closer to where your average line is near the line of greatness. So it takes less effort to have days of greatness. And this increases the number of days of greatness available to you. So let's use a mundane example, like brushing your teeth. Think about it. When you were a child, how much energy did it take to brush your teeth? Probably quite a bit, because brushing your teeth is actually quite unnatural. So your mother probably had to say, hey, I need you to brush your teeth now, before school, before bed, every day, day in and day out, and it was probably just as much energy for your mother as it was for you. But now that you're an adult, hopefully, brushing your teeth is not something that requires lots of your energy. And because it doesn't require any energy anymore, you have good dental hygiene, which reduces the number of total health problems that you will encounter in your life that otherwise would require manual solutions. So the same could be said of, using the toilet. Scott Peck famously says that human nature is to go to the bathroom in our pants. And as it turns out, it's actually quite useful that we are trained as children to do the very unnatural thing of using the toilet when we need to use the bathroom. So we use the toilet, we don't go to the bathroom in our pants, and this also dramatically increases our hygiene and makes life quite a bit more livable for us. Now, fortunately, most people enter adulthood able to brush their teeth and use the bathroom out of habit. It doesn't really require any energy in order to do this. But other things, they tend to take more energy. So let me use a personal example. A lot of the work that I have to do every day involves writing. And it involves writing different kinds of things. Sometimes I have to write blog posts, sometimes I have to write emails, lots of emails. Sometimes I have to write internal documents for my staff. And all of this writing is quite energy intensive. Now, one of the things that I am trying to do, but it's very difficult, is to wake up and every morning, before I do anything else, write at least 1,000 words. When I have approached this habit, even if they aren't good words, I get a good bulk of my work for the day done in the first few hours. And this has been a very difficult discipline to implement in order to get to this habit, and I'm still not quite there. But it's really been an important part of my own professional growth so that I am able to do more things with the rest of my day. Because let's say that I really do need to write at least 1,000 words every day no matter what. Well, if I can get those 1,000 words written in the first couple of hours of the day, then the rest of my day is mentally free to do any of the other things I might need to do. But if I don't get that done at the beginning of the day, then it's sort of hanging over me the whole day. So what I would challenge you to do is identify the areas of your life that are consistently problematic for you. So every day you have the same problem with the same thing. This is probably an indication of where you need to develop your habits. And when you do this, when you go through and do an inventory of your daily recurring problems, you can also prioritize them. You can say, okay, which of these problems cause me the most pain? Well, that's probably where you should invest your habit development first. And it really is an investment, okay? It's sacrificing present resources today, usually your time and energy, in order to have a greater return in the future. Now, think about how much time of your life and energy of your life you've saved by having the habit of brushing your teeth. Imagine all of the hours of productive energy that you have saved just from usually probably your mother's investment of forcing you to brush your teeth. Now, the trouble is that in adulthood, habit development is much more difficult than in childhood, and there are a couple of reasons for this. One of the reasons for this is that in adulthood, you don't have your mother telling you you have to do something and threatening you with taking away your privileges, because most of us in adulthood no longer have our mothers controlling our privileges. So it turns out that this is a big loss to adults, is not having our mothers forcing us to develop new habits. Now, if you are lucky, you maybe have a good friend, a spouse, a boyfriend or girlfriend who can help you develop those habits. If you try to do it alone, it's probably not going to work out so well for you, in fact. Habit development on your own is a pretty losing proposition for most people. And the reason for that is that human nature is to go to the bathroom in our pants. Human nature is always at the margin, doing whatever comes most easily, and always putting off until later what comes with a little more difficulty. And so this is why habit development is, as I said, an automated form of discipline. So let's talk about what it is that we're automating when we develop habits. Now, if you'll remember, at the beginning, I was saying that discipline is the set of tools by which we meet and solve the problems and pains of life. And Scott Peck gives us 4 such tools. He says that these 4 tools of discipline are 1, delaying gratification, 2, assuming responsibility, 3, dedication to reality, and 4, balancing. So let's talk about these one by one. Delaying gratification is the process of scheduling pain and pleasure in life so that you endure the pain now and put off the pleasure until later in order to achieve more pleasure in total. So it's very important to notice here that I'm not advocating more pain. I'm actually advocating more pleasure. But the only way to get that pleasure is to put the pain first. You may be familiar with a very famous study called the marshmallow experiment. And the marshmallow experiment is probably the most significant experiment done on the benefits of delaying gratification. And what they did is these psychologists took test subjects who were children, small children, and you know, children make very good test subjects for psychological experimentation because they don't really realize they're being experimented upon. Adults kind of mess up these things. So children make very good psychological test subjects. And so these psychologists took these children, and one by one, they would take them into a room and say, okay, I have this marshmallow. I'm going to give it to you. And then now I have to leave the room for a few minutes. And while I'm gone, it's your choice, but you can eat the marshmallow. Or if you don't eat it, and then when I come back, if you haven't eaten the marshmallow, then I will give you a second marshmallow. But it only works if you don't eat the first one. So if you eat the first one, then you only get one marshmallow. So, of course, you can imagine it's quite interesting watching some of the videos of these experiments. The psychologist gives the child the marshmallow, the psychologist leaves the room. Of course, some of the children just immediately eat the marshmallow. No ability to delay gratification at all. Other children are like, stare at the marshmallow, look at the door, stare at the marshmallow. Other children will like try to distract themselves. They'll turn their back, go look at the books on the shelf, anything to avoid looking at the marshmallow because they know it will tempt them. But the study, which sounds kind of trivial, turns out to have been very predictive. So in the original study, they followed the test subjects through the next 20 years of life, and they found that the children that did not eat the marshmallow, the ones that waited for the second marshmallow, had lower rates of divorce, lower rates of indebtedness, lower rates of alcoholism, and so on. So of the general metrics that most of us would say, okay, this is living a pretty decent life, the children who had the ability to delay eating the marshmallow scored much better 20 years later. So to make it into adulthood with the ability to delay gratification is a really important tool of discipline. But it's one that we can always improve upon. So a few years ago, one of my business partners, Antonio Mano, he taught me about the kitchen metaphor. And the kitchen metaphor is one of the best examples of delaying gratification that I've encountered so far. And the kitchen metaphor goes like this. You finish eating, and you have your dirty dishes. And you basically have two choices. You can continue enjoying the aftermath of the meal, sitting there in pleasure, maybe drinking some more wine. All the while, your dishes are accumulating food that just keeps drying on more and more and more. Or you can stand up, go wash the dishes, and then get back to enjoying that later. Now, if you're the kind of person who has dishes in your sink from 3 days ago, Antonio would tell you that he thinks your probability of succeeding at anything else in your life is probably pretty low, because it indicates in something very small that you are unwilling to delay gratification. So if you're unwilling to delay gratification in the small things, you're probably also unwilling to delay gratification in the more significant things. This is tremendously important. So, in a sense, you have to take an accounting of all of the things in your life that you don't like doing. How much are you putting them off? The more you put them off, the worse your prospects are for succeeding at all the things you want to achieve with your life. So, where the failure to delay gratification is basically saying to the problem that you encounter, oh, I'll get to it later, don't worry. With our second tool of discipline, assuming responsibility, you are saying, I see the problem, but it's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem. Well, the trouble with this is that if you go through life throwing your problems off on somebody else, then they probably aren't going to get solved because nobody else has an incentive to solve your problems. Even if you didn't cause the problem, even if somebody else really did cause the problem, unfortunately for you, nobody else has an incentive to solve it. Only you have an incentive to solve it. Now, it may be radically unfair that you have any particular problem. And in fact, life is full of this sort of unfairness. But this unfairness does not change the hard, cold, miserable fact that only you have an incentive to solve your problem. So when you encounter a problem, and it's a problem for you because it's causing you pain, you have to say, well, if I don't solve it, nobody will. This is my problem to solve, in fact. And this is a sad reality of adulthood, that nobody else is just going to come along and rescue you from your problems. So you have to take responsibility for it. And as you're trying to develop habits, you might notice that anytime you fail to delay gratification, you reset the clock on your habit. So if you spend 5 weeks trying to develop a habit and then one day you put something off, you go back to the beginning. It's just like Mario Brothers, you know? If you are running along through a level in Mario Brothers and you don't make it to the end of the level before you die, you usually go back to the beginning or back to a checkpoint. And the same is true of habit development. And the daily discipline to delay gratification and assume responsibility, these are sort of like superpowers. The thing about discipline is that it really functions as a superpower. So if you, when you wake up in the morning, put on your delaying gratification hat, it's sort of like getting a mushroom in Mario Brothers. You grow up, you're bigger and stronger, you can jump higher, you can do more things, and maybe you get to the end of the level, and then voila, you have a habit. And then maybe you are able to assume responsibility for all of your problems each day. This is sort of like getting the flower. You can shoot fire. When you assume responsibility for all of your problems, it's literally like having the power to spit fire on them. And this gets us to our third tool of discipline, which is dedication to reality. Now, where in the first two tools, you are acknowledging that there's a problem. You're just saying either, I'll get to it later, or it's not my problem. With dedication to reality, your failure to be disciplined is actually ignoring the problem entirely, saying, oh, I don't see any problem. Don't show me any problem. I don't think there's one here at all. There's this famous, now pretty, internet famous cartoon of a dog sitting in a house that is on fire and saying, this is fine. Well, when we pretend like problems don't exist, we are literally sitting in our own mental house on fire saying, this is fine. And dedication to reality is very painful because it means that your map of reality is inaccurate. It means accepting every day that what you think is true of the world may not in fact be true. And when you encounter information that says this information that you did have on your map is false, you have to painstakingly remove it from your map and put the new information on it. Now, the more often you do this, the less painful it is. If you only update your map once every couple of years, you're probably going to have a lot of pain. In some sense, this is what happens to people when they say they're having a midlife crisis or a quarter-life crisis. It means that all of a sudden, they have realized that their map of reality was wrong, and they have to update it. And in fact, it was probably really wrong, and they have to do a massive update to it. And this leads to all sorts of strange and erratic behavior from people. Now, if you went through life updating your map just a little bit every single day, every tiny bit of new information gets incorporated in the map, even if it causes you just little bits of pain every day, this is probably going to achieve an overall reduction of pain in the long run. So when you meet a problem, whether this is an acute problem or a sort of chronic problem, I mean, like a chronic problem might be you realize that the way you are eating is killing you. It's making you unhappy. It's causing you to be less healthy, to feel less attractive. Okay, so now this doesn't just mean, oh, I'll go on a quick diet. It actually means I have to completely change my lifestyle. Well, that's a very painful piece of information to add to your map. And this could apply to so many things. Maybe you wake up one day and realize that your relationships with your friends and family are unhealthy for you or for them or both. And it's almost always the case that an unhealthy relationship for one person is an unhealthy relationship for all of the people involved in the relationship. Well, this means you have to make changes, and changes are hard. Changes require effort, because it's very easy to get into a rut, a worn path of walking every day. And if it's not a good one, then it's going to create more problems for you than it solves. And so you may have to update that map and say, okay, I can't walk this way anymore, I have to walk this other way. Now, this brings us to the fourth tool of discipline, which is balancing. And you might say, oh, hooray, this one is the relief from all of the others, but it's actually just as difficult to implement as the first three, because balancing is disciplining discipline itself. Balancing means bringing to bear a constant consciousness of all factors on the way that you live your life minute by minute. It means saying, okay, right now is the time to delay gratification, and then in 1 hour, it's the time to take a break from delaying gratification to recover. But only for 10 minutes, and then I have to get back to it. Or it's saying, okay, I need to take a vacation because I really have ruined my health, and I need to recuperate. And then, but I'm so addicted to my email that on my vacation, I know that I need to not look at it at all. It'll be really painful, but I know that's what's good for me mentally. It means understanding that some things, in fact, are not your responsibility. That some things are just realities to be accepted or mysteries to be appreciated. For example, at some point in your life, if you are fortunate, you will come to the conclusion that it is impossible for you to make any other adult person happy. That another adult's happiness is actually not something that you can even possibly be responsible for. And so you may have to let go of that need to please somebody else, because not only is it not your responsibility, it's not even within your capability. And it's important to understand that the word responsibility literally comes from the joining of the word response and ability. So responsibility is the ability to respond to a problem. That's the literal meaning of the word. So the thing is that when another adult is unhappy, it doesn't matter if they're your spouse, your child, your parent, your brother, your sister, your friend, your coworker, you actually have no ability to respond to that problem. There is no response you can give that will change that problem. So it's not your responsibility. You don't have to be responsible for that other person's unhappiness. Now, all of this balancing stuff may sound really difficult, and it is, because it requires a heightened state of consciousness. And when I say a heightened state of consciousness, I don't mean some woo-woo, ethereal, New Age stuff. I mean just being aware of details. That's what consciousness is. Consciousness is the ability to see details, and then to act in accordance with these new details on your map. So, you may think that somebody is being a real drag if they say, hey, I see that, on the plates that you washed here, there's still some stuff stuck on here. It's not really that clean. That is actually consciousness. That is a higher form of consciousness. I know it doesn't sound nearly as exciting as you wish consciousness could be. But that's really the reality of it, is that consciousness is the ability to see more details that other people don't see. And the more of those details you see, the more responsibility you have, because most of them will require you to take action based upon them. And you can see why people mostly just don't want to be aware. They don't want to see new information because it means they will have to do more work. But if you want to avoid the life of suck, and especially if you want to avoid the life of mediocrity, you must be constantly looking for new details. You must constantly be looking to raise your level of conscious awareness of everything that's going on around you so that you can take action to meet and resolve these problems and pains. And the more automatic this becomes for you, the more of a habit this way of living becomes inside of your mind, the fewer problems you will have. Now, paradoxically, it also means the more problems you will be aware of. So, objectively, you will have fewer problems, but subjectively, it will seem like you have more problems. So don't be discouraged. Realize that this is just the cost of getting rid of problems, that you will be aware of more of them. But just as solving a problem, the thing is that solving a problem doesn't just get rid of a problem, it also enhances your capacity to solve other problems. So as you are aware of more problems, you will also grow in the strength to solve them. And this is the never-ending, infinite game of personal growth. You will never achieve enlightenment. You will never achieve perfection. It's an infinite game. And it's sort of like the mathematical concept of the asymptote. It will approach, but never cross. So if you are constantly improving yourself and cutting by half the number of problems that you have, you will still never eliminate all of your problems. They just keep going and going, and you're aware of more and more of them, but they become easier to solve. And to the extent that you are able to surround yourself with other people who are also playing this infinite game, you will have emotional support to get through the more difficult periods. And importantly, you will have other people who are also updating their maps that you can compare maps with, and you don't have to go through all of the suffering to get the information for your map yourself. You can get it also from other people's maps. So, as we wrap up this discussion of how to improve your day-to-day life, I want to encourage you not to be too disheartened, because it may seem like this is just a lot of work and it's almost impossible. And if you try to take on the whole problem at once, it is impossible, because by the nature of it being an infinite game, you can't do all of it at once or ever. So the only thing you can do is identify the lowest hanging fruit, the place in your life where you can make the biggest impact with the least effort, and start there. And then do it again, and again, and again, and again, until the process itself becomes a habit. And then, I can guarantee you, you will have more days of greatness and fewer days of mediocrity. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you here in Chile with us at some future time very soon.